So welcome to the Marin Coalition. My name is Scott Pinsky. I'm the chair, and we thank you for braving the weather to get here. If this is your first time here at Dominican, we've changed our location, and hopefully this room is going to work for everyone today. And hopefully we'll get some more people straggling in as they get through the rain.
You'd say we had 45 registered.
Yeah, we had 45 people registered. So I don't know how many of those are able to get through the weather, but hopefully they'll get here. And if not, this is being recorded. It will be on video on our website. So anyone who missed it, or if you want to send this recording to your friends later on, all our programs are on our archives page at marincoalition.org. Most of you probably know Marin Coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit community organization. We exist to create what we term conversations that matter here in Marin on topics of interest to the community. This year marks our 50th anniversary, so we like to think we've made an impact on the county over these many decades. Let me take a moment and introduce our newest member of the board. We have Pat Shepard over here. Raise your hand, Pat. Hi there. Pat just volunteered and signed up, so we're delighted to have her. Another new member, Stephen Keys, is right over there. Stephen just joined us a couple of months ago. And the remainder of our board, you probably already know. Kevin Haggerty is in the corner, our vice chair. Alan Shabitz here is our webmaster, and Pat Randolph is in the corner back there. So before we go to today's program, I just want to tell you our next program will be in March, on March 6th, here in this room at 1 o'clock. The topic will be West Marin and the future of ranching in West Marin and Point Reyes National Seashore. We have an excellent panel of 4 individuals who are very familiar with this issue and have been involved in the ongoing litigation that many of you probably have read about over the course of the last several months, if not years, which has now come to resolution in the last few weeks. So it's a very pivotal time to talk about West Marin and ranching and the future of the seashore. Our panel is stellar, and we're going to have some amazing conversations on March 6th. So hopefully you'll be able to join us at 1 o'clock then. And future programs we'll announce as we get them set up. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Why is it 1 o'clock?
Well, we're playing with different times. It's a good question. We've been trying to be responsive to the audience, and we've done surveys at most of our events asking people what they think about this time, this location, that location. It's very hard to please all the people all the time. And the issue we had with the 4 o'clock start time is that by the time the program is finished, it's dark and people are driving home in the dark. So and the commute is a little more difficult. So we're going to try 1 o'clock, and hopefully that will be a convenient time for people. All right, moving on. So today, how's the sound? Are we too loud, too soft? Okay, great, terrific, thank you. We're going to hear today about proactive steps that Marin County and the City of San Rafael are taking to address some of the most pressing challenges facing our community, from wildfire preparation to homeless-related initiatives, addressing sea level rise, and the opportunities brought on by new housing and business investments. Local leaders are working to create a resilient and a thriving future. And we're honored today to have Mayor Colin of San Rafael and Marin County Supervisor Marin Colbert here to share their updates on key initiatives that they're engaged in, and to discuss how the city and the county are working collaboratively to ensure the safety, sustainability, and profitability for all Marin residents. Marin Colbert grew up in Bethel, am I saying that right, Connecticut?
It's Colbert. But you ought to know about that.
Is it?
Yes.
It's Colbert.
Like the guy on TV.
Why did I think it was Colbert? My mistake.
That's all right.
Mr. Colbert. Well, that's easier for me to remember because I watched Colbert and I was having to adjust.
And easier for the voters to remember.
There you go. How embarrassing for me. So how do you say Bethel?
Bethel.
Bethel.
But I don't really care about his my last name. I don't really care what it is.
I'll just, my mnemonic will be Bethel Merman. Sorry, anybody old enough to remember? Never mind. I'm gonna start over.
No.
No, you're good, man. Just
Well,
roll with it. Roll with it.
We'll delete it all.
No, no,
That's
just
what,
roll with it.
that's what Colbert does. He just takes it out,
You're
right?
good. You're all good.
All right, so Mr. Colbert grew up in Bethel, Connecticut as part of the first African-American family to live in the area. He attended Oberlin College, earning degrees in political science and theater. Later received degrees in law and public policy from the University of Chicago. And I guess he brought his weather with us today. After practicing law for 5 years, Brian.
You know, we're a routine, right?
Yeah, that's right. Details. After practicing law for 5 years, he explored entrepreneurial ventures before moving to Turkey with his wife, Nihal. I think I said that right. Nihal.
Sorry, what?
Knee haul.
Nihal, see? Where he taught in the Department of International Relations at Izmir University of Economics for several years. And I want to hear more about Turkey later. In 2007, he and Nihal relocated to San Francisco, later settling in San Anselmo. Did I say that right? Where he was attracted by the Marin County open spaces and excellent schools. He joined the town's Economic Development Committee, eventually becoming chair. He was elected to the San Anselmo Town Council in 2017 and was reelected in 2020, serving a term as mayor. In that role, he spearheaded the Reimagining Creek Park project, transforming a flood mitigation effort into a dynamic community park that revitalizes, San Anselmo's downtown. Also working with local organizations on the inaugural Economic Vitality Strategic Plan Steering Committee. Brian also holds leadership roles with the Transportation Authority Marin and Marin Transit, and was the 2022-23 president of the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members, where he advocated for improving fire prevention and emergency preparedness measures and preserving open space. In 2024, Brian was a Marin delegate to the Democratic National Convention. That must have been fun. Professionally, he is the director of business development and patient experience for an innovative medical practice in San Francisco. And I'll go ahead and just introduce Mayor Kate, although Brian will start first. So you all know Mayor Kate Colin, the first woman to hold the office of mayor since the city of San Rafael was incorporated 175 years ago in 1847. How about that? She was elected to the San Rafael City Council in 2013 after serving on the Planning Commission for 8 years. She's lived in Sun Valley area with her husband and 2 children since 1996. Mayor Kate's priority for the city is to continue to strengthen San Rafael after the pandemic years by focusing on 4 key policy areas for 2025. 1, economic growth. 2, homelessness and housing. 3, sustainability, and particularly wildfire prevention and sea level rise. And 4, social justice. She strongly believes in working with the community to find solutions that reflect our community's values, as well as partnerships with local residents, businesses, and neighborhoods to make San Rafael the best that it can be. Mayor Kate is one of only 6 mayors nationally to receive the prestigious 2024 Mayoral Fellowship from the Mayor Institute of City Design, conducted through the U.S. Conference of Mayors and taught through the Harvard Graduate School of Design. She's also chair of the San Rafael Sanitation District and represents San Rafael on several regional boards, including the Transportation Authority Marin, TAM, the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit, which most of you know as SMART, Bay Waterfront Adaptation Vulnerability Evaluation, known as Bay WAVE. It's a good reason we do acronyms. And the elected official task force of the Bay Conservation and Development Commission. She's a busy lady. Kate is a strong advocate for gun safety and is the only elected city official consistently participating in the Marin County District Attorney's Gun Safety Collaborative. She's a member of the Climate Mayors, Mayors Against Illegal Guns, and Mayors for Guaranteed Income. Almost done. With an MBA from Kellogg Graduate School of Management and a BA from Dartmouth College, she's a lifelong athlete who is often seen running the trails or cycling through our city streets. How many have seen Mayor Kate on the street? All right, we'll talk about that later. It is my honor and privilege to introduce Supervisor, former Mayor, Brian Colbert.
Let me know when you want the presentation started.
Right on. Thanks, Scott. Sony, I'm the new supervisor, and I gotta tell you, that intro is like way too long. And so,
I trimmed it down.
and you should have trimmed it a little bit more. In any case, it's great to be here. It's a pleasure to share the stage with Mayor Kate. Normally, I follow Mayor Kate, so I am super psyched for the first time in my life. I'm actually in front of Mayor Kate. So let's get to it. So I've got a little bit of a different take on things. So since I'm new to the soups, I thought I'd give you some of my new soup energy that I'm hoping to bring to the county. That's what I'm talking about, right? So here we are, shaping Marin's future, local leadership in action. Ta-da.
Oh, no, it doesn't want to work. Terrific. All right. Until that works. Oh. There you go.
Okay, there's a presentation overview. We're going to be talking about, oh boy,
Hey,
Government 101, 21st Century Marin, carry a focus, a call to action, and then I'll be turning over to Mayor Kate. So I think most of you are all familiar with it, but here's a high level, right? We've got 5 supervisors. I'm District 2. That's me, Marin Colbert. District 2 is essentially the Ross Valley. So it spans all the way from Fairfax, Sleepy Hollow, San Anselmo, Kentfield, Greenbrae, Ross, most of Larkspur, and actually a little bit of San Rafael, Cal Park, Lamita Park, Gerstle Park, and Bret Hart. And I will say, during the campaign, I knocked on almost 20,000 doors. So like I saw a whole lot, like I was like, where am I? Can I get back to my car? Am I lost? But it's great because now I know like where all the little streets and all the neighborhoods are, and got to talk to a lot of people. So here, the county of Marin, right? And so the county of Marin is an interesting place. So I come from the private sector, but more importantly, I come from the cities and towns. So if you come from a city and town, on a certain level, you might not have any idea or even really connect with county government, because most people in the United States, you care about your basic government services, right? You're like local government, what's up with my roads? What's up with my trash? What's up with my stop sign? And there you interact with your city government. So I, as a council member, I used to tell people, I'm just a policy guy. I don't actually do anything. I'm going to talk to the town manager, and he's going to talk to our really great town staff and get that done. But if you live in your unincorporated areas, well, then all of a sudden your county supervisor does everything, soup to nuts, right? So they are responsible for your potholes, for connecting with your garbage, your power, all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, they're doing all this awesome county government stuff. So we're connecting with our friends and allies in Sacramento. We're seeing what's going on in the other 9 Bay Area counties. We're connected in Washington, D.C. So one of the things I'm trying to understand and learn is like, what is that new relationship, right? And also bring that level of execution and implementation that I learned at the county, at the city of San Anselmo, like upwards to the county. So let's talk about, to me, what does a 21st century Marin County mean? And when I say me, it's sort of me through my prism of sort of being places in the world and sort of connecting with people and sort of working in city government. So I think the first and fundamental thing is to be guided by placemaking, right? So what is placemaking? Placemaking is the general idea that public space is now the ultimate driver for what moves community, right? So in the past, so let's say back in the 1950s, downtowns were your big mover, right? Like the old Woolworth store and the old Ben Franklin, all that kind of stuff. And then the 70s came along, and then they kind of destroyed downtowns and really sort of set them back. But now people want to come back to downtowns, right? Particularly after COVID, right? Like downtowns, community vitality is the real mover. And what moves people, it's public space. So I grew up in Connecticut, outside of New York City. So when you went to New York, even now you go, hey, let's meet at Grand Central Station. And then you sort of figure out what you want to do. Or let's go to Central Park. And then you're like, we go to the west side, the east side, all that kind of stuff. So in San Anselmo, the idea of placemaking is essentially Creek Park, right? Let's come to Creek Park. And then we can sort of figure out where we're going to go. Are we going to go to a restaurant? Are we going to go shopping? And to me, a public space is a great equalizer because ultimately, like everybody can use it. right? I say, come to San Anselmo. I don't need you to spend $80 for dinner. If you want to, that's great, but you can come and just enjoy the space, right? There's also the powerfulness of random encounters, right? Like people like, oh, I don't have a relationship with that person. Well, actually you do. A relationship is stranger until you engage with them, and then you take it from there, right? So that's ultimately like what placemaking is. And then you want to enhance and expect technology to ensure connectivity for all residents. And so, Marshall McClellan in the 60s in Canada was like, the medium is the message, but like I flip it into, right, you have to sort of figure out to meet where people are, right? Like, so the private sector sorted that out, right? Like the private sector knows more about us than anyone, right? Like, there's all this sort of stuff like, when you're going to the grocery store, like shop on the outer side. Don't like, man, those grocery stores are working me over, right? Like I'm a victim as soon as I set in, right? So from the government perspective, like what can we figure out and learn about our community, right, to engage them in sort of where they want to be met at? And so what's the high level take? Well, the high level take is the workforce in the United States has changed, right? In the 50s, for instance, any number of women could not participate in the workforce due to their gender, right? But now they have those opportunities. So the idea of volunteerism has changed. There's not like a whole lot of women as there were in the 50s that couldn't take their time and skills to do other things which involve their passion. So now you have to figure out how do you connect and activate with all people of all genders, like what works, right? So many people are now working for two families or they have other passions. So how do we connect with them? And then you ensure smart city planning and initiatives to improve efficiency and the quality of life. And smart city planning is essentially like, how do you leverage the power of technology, blend it with a qualitative mass to make cities sort of more responsive, right? How can you take data to make people's lives better in a way that's meaningful to them? So let's see things with fresh eyes. So I like trying to look at everything with the fresh eyes. At a certain level, it's like, let's sort of relearn what we were like when we were kids, right? Because a kid is always like, why, right? Like, why is the world round? Like, why couldn't it be flat, right? And then you grow out of that and you're like, oh, it could never be flat. And then you sort of lose that ability to think outside the box, right? So what does that look like? So the first is, let's challenge assumptions about existing systems to foster innovation. So I come from the private sector. I worked on Wall Street for a while. I shilled junk bonds on Wall Street. Then I trod in Turkey. And then I came back to the United States and worked in Silicon Valley. And, Silicon Valley's whole take is disruption, which, yeah. But their whole take is, could we do things in a different way, right? Like the whole question is, just because we've been doing something for a while, doesn't mean we can't sort of ask, well, this is the way we should continue to do it. Is there not a better and more efficient way to do it, right? And then, the other is like, learn from others, right? So we do things in California, Marin, we think, oh, wow, we're doing really awesome things. And the truth is, probably not so much, right? Like other things are probably being done in other places that are more interesting, more exciting. I was listening to this podcast the other day, which I'm not really a podcast guy, but whatever. Anyway, they were talking about food delivery service, and they were talking about cloud kitchens. And cloud kitchens are essentially like, you like buy a blank space, you make all kinds of different foods. But he was talking about food delivery. And I have to say, having lived in New York City for 7 years, I think food delivery on the West Coast is just a disaster. Like it is just never right. Like even when I go into the restaurant, I'm like, give me this. I get home and my daughter's like, did you say that? And I'm like, I said it and I checked it and it's just not right. Right? Actually, right? You're like, oh, you live in New York, like you get food from everywhere. And what the person said was, if you want cutting edge in food delivery, don't look anywhere in the United States. You go to China. They go, the Chinese are mastering food delivery on a scale that's like kind of incredible. And even when you pull out the whole sort of labor component, right? Like the whole building and structure is just designed for a whole series of lockers so that food just sort of shows up at people's houses, right? And I'm not sort of saying like that's ultimately the way to go, but we should always not be afraid to look far afield and see what's going on in other places of the world. And just so you know, like, well, maybe you don't want to. Anyway, I will tell you, I've backpacked 4 times for 3 months and once for 6 months. So I've been to the developing world, and like some of the things that people are like trying to bring here, like they've already sort of sorted out in the developing world. One, because they simply don't have the cost structure we hear, or one is because of the level of entrepreneurialism, or two, they're just sort of sketching things from a whole blue sky. They're like, wow, we can just sort of create from the ground up. So they've learned what more advanced economies have done. And then they're just like, boom, let's do it this way. And then the last is engage diverse perspectives, right? Which is sort of like learn from others. Like, don't be afraid to engage with people like, hey, have you thought about that? You're like, no. You're like, no, never thought about it. Where could it go? So here we go. Like, we want to rethink our processes, right? Like, why do we do those things? Like, it's sometimes hard, right? Like, the county's a big, or the county's like $1 billion organization with like thousands of people. And there are well-meaning people, like they are there to serve the public, right? But you know, as within any organizations, right, you just sort of get stuck. Oh, we do this thing because why? Like, I run a concierge medical practice in the city, and we hire nurse practitioners to work with us. And they're like, why do you do this? And we're like, don't actually know why we do. Like, we sort of done it for a while, and you're like, oh, here's how we do it in this organization, or here's best practices, or let's try this, right? You can't be afraid to do a pilot or a beta or iterate. I want to see that kind of energy brought to the county, which is similar to identifying outdated methods and barriers, and you want to design systems for efficiency and adaptability. So I went to the University of Chicago, right? So if you know that, like, we all worked, worship at the altar of Milton Friedman, right? But that said, one cannot lose sense that we are human beings, right? Efficiency is a powerful driver, but you can never lose the human touch, right? These are real lives behind the numbers and the data. So revolutionary tools, right? Digital transformation for better service delivery. But I think number 2 is actually really interesting. AI and data, right? So I think AI, I don't know if AI will like turn us into the Terminator and Arnold Schwarzenegger will come back to the future and I'll be like, no, go back. But maybe, right? Maybe I'm actually Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back. But anyway, I think what's really interesting is that AI is an incredible tool that I use professionally and personally, like in terms of the ability to sort of take data and move those conversations forward so we can have better outcomes. I mean, it's not perfect. Most AI platforms around 80%, right? You don't want to make life or death decisions about them. I think the really interesting opportunities for AI we haven't seen yet, because most of the models right now are sort of large scale. But I think what will happen is there will be a real powerful fork in the road, and we will actually see models designed for particular silos. So we will actually see models designed for like road repair or for delivery of services, and then things become really interesting. So the real question is, how will we integrate that kind of powerful AI tools into serving the pop, into serving our community? How will those tools enable the county staff in partnership with cities and towns to sort of be more effective and take us into the future? Public engagement, right? So it's always this, right, incredible challenge. Like, how do you engage the public, right? Like, you have a meeting, people are like, we can't have the meeting then, or why you move the meeting, right? I know from San Anselmo Town Council, our meetings were 7 o'clock on a Tuesday, and that's just a challenge for any number of people, right? Particularly like your working families, right? Like, they come home, like they're trying to feed their kids, right? So how do you do that? We used to have our economic development committee meeting at 8:45 in San Anselmo, and any number of people like, I'm working, right? Right. So it's always like, what does public engagement look like? And I think ultimately, as I alluded to earlier, just take on various and different forms. Is it connecting with the phone? Are we all walking around taking classes? Like, we just have to sort of keep trying to figure out how to connect with people, right? And it's not just engagement. I mean, I think people want true, authentic engagement. Like, what is that conversation, right? They don't want just a black box. Yeah, so did you actually listen to me? And did it actually influence the decision that's being made? And then the fourth is agile methods. So agile methods actually comes from technology development. So I used to be connected with software companies. My wife is still is. And agile development is really just like, we're going to move quickly. We're going to take giant tasks into small, discrete tasks. We're going to iterate, and we're going to keep sort of feeding back that loop. And frankly, government's just not that good at that, right? That small group feedback loop, quick iteration, let's try. And part of it is, any number of people working on the public side, like, they're a little bit scared, right? Oh, how much public engagement can we have, right? Because we all know how it goes, right? You have 30 meetings, somebody showed up to the 31st, like, there've never been a meeting. Like, we're working the last 30 times, like, I'm skiing in Tahoe. So you just have to be sort of mindful. But I think that's something we need to commit to try and do. And just for the record, I don't ski, but I do snowshoe and ice skate. So we go with user-friendly, responsive. We want to streamline processes, priorities, reduce inefficiency, customer service. So like, what's the big idea that would animate all of that, right? Because I'm like a real big idea person. So in Boston, if like you have a problem, you just call 311. Like whatever your problem is, whatever you see, and there's just a group of basic like city concierge people, like their job is to help you figure out and resolve your problem. And it's just like 3 numbers. And you think, wow, that's that's an elegant solution, right? So I would love to see something like that implemented here, or at least that sort of focus on what works for people. There's another solution, but it might be on another slide, but I'll get to it just in case, because I don't want to like double up on the slides in case I have nothing to say. So we come back to, again, intentional placemaking. So like, what is placemaking? So let's focus on community and growth. So the first is you like want to have this sense of place, right? Like, and I talk about here Marin's identity and ethos. So me, if you were to say like, what is Marin's identity and ethos? I think the one thing that separates Marin County from sort of the rest of the 9 Bay carriers and sort of anywhere else is truly the commitment to open space. Like it's just fundamentally different. Like Marin just sort of looks different. So every Super Bowl Sunday, my daughter, Layla, who's like totally awesome, she and I go up to Thomas Keller's, not because we want to watch the Super Bowl there, but his fried chicken is like crazy good. So we went up there on Sunday. Oh, and it's like really good. Like you have to order it like 2 weeks in advance because it sells out. But in any case, we're driving up to Sonoma through Marin and it's like so green and so beautiful. You're like, wow, I am definitely not in LA. It is gorgeous, right? And that has been hard fought. So the trick is, how do we do community and growth and walkability as while maintaining our ethos? And I think it can be done. Like, what is that sense of place? That commitment to open space, right? And design, right? So that's the first one. The second one is, right, we need to sort of figure out like the transportation element, right? Like, I believe in climate change. Ultimately, right, you want to believe, you got to get people out of cars. But if you want to get people out of cars, you want them to be able to get around safely. The reality is most people want to be in their cars because they don't want to walk or bike, because they think if they're not in a car, they're going to get whacked by somebody who generally is their neighbor, right? Right? You just have to be sort of careful about that, what that looks like, right? I tell people on the campaign trail, so when you try and recall me, you'll be like, well, Alicia told me we need to build housing. Why? Because I actually think an economic diversity for the people who live here is fundamentally important, right? I think it's a moral imperative, right? Marin should not just be for venture capitalists and hedge funds. The other thing is, I would encourage you all to come to San Anselmo on a Friday or Saturday night when we shut the town. I think that when we close the streets, people want to engage with real people in stores and shop. I know them by name. We need to figure out a way for people to find out and live here, right? So, and then that sort of ties into the idea of walkability, right? Like one of the things we love in Marin is like, it's great to go like up into the open space, but you can't walk across the street, right? Because you're scared, right? So we got to sort of figure out how to work on that. So the key focus is that I think, right, where the county can sort of leverage things are, the first again is housing, right? How do we support like our working families? And I have to say, I've only been on the soups for like a month, but I see this even in town council, like when things come to the county on a certain level, it's too late. We have to figure out how to develop relationships with private landowners when they're selling the property before it goes in the hands of other private property holders, right? Now, if you're a private property, you get to do what you want, right? Like, I believe in the U.S. Constitution. I'm a big John Locke guy, right? I'm able to get to do what I want, like as long as it's not offending my other neighbors. That said, if the property is put into the hands of some kind of nonprofit, county, other entity, right? Then all of a sudden you can really engage in placemaking, right? Then you can make a real concerted effort to provide housing for working families within the ethos of Marin that works for all of us. So I'm really focused on that. Transportation. So that, anybody actually know what that is? Okay, that's not Mary Kate, because she knows and she's a cheater. Boo, Mary Kate.
Willy Wonka. Roundabout?
That's close. That is a floating bicycle ring. Yeah, it's pretty sweet, huh? So I took a mobility tour, I don't know, pre-COVID, where everything is like it's like pre-COVID. It's like post-enlightenment, pre-COVID, like everything happens in between, like the French Revolution, the Cold War. Anyway, so I take a mobility tour. I was in the Netherlands for 7 days, never set foot in a car. It's totally awesome. Yes. And this is like a biker's holy grail. So what it is is a roundabout for cars, like in the middle, and then like 20 feet up in the air, it's a bicycle roundabout. It is totally so sweet. I wanted to do that at the hub in San Anselmo. Is that funny? Well, but here's the reason why we can't do it. There's actually two reasons why we can't. Like, we just don't have enough space to do it yet. Right? We just, right. But I thought about it. We tried anyway. I think it's super cool. Like, that's the kind of forwarding. And then lastly, going back to San Anselmo, right? We have the whole idea of public-private partnership. How can the private sector partner with the public sector to provide public amenities? So this is Imagination Park that was generously gifted by Mr. George Lucas in San Anselmo, where the birthplace. And I have to say that park in downtown San Anselmo is what inspired me for the vision of creating a necklace of green space in downtown San Anselmo. The second piece is which the revisioning of Creek Park. Then I will let someone else carry on that vision. So anyway, I think public-private partnerships are incredibly powerful. And then here's the call to action. And so you're probably wondering, anybody know what that building is? Yes. So, I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright, some stuff is great, some stuff is not. I love the Guggenheim, but let's be clear. The addition is an abomination. And for many years, I would like seriously never even set foot. But now I have, because I took my daughter to the Guggenheim and I was like, okay, we'll go see private collection. Anyway, I absolutely love the Guggenheim. Although my wife was a BFA from Cornell, she says that the Guggenheim, it fights with the art. And now I can sort of see that. Although I will say when they did motorcycles at the Guggenheim, they did not fight the motorcycles. It was totally sweet. When I lived in New York, I would just sometimes go to the lobby just to be like, this is awesome. To find inspiration. In any case, that is totally awesome. To me, that's like a symbol of inspiration, like the Guggenheim. So bold conversations, right? Bold conversations, right? Like I'm not sort of triggered by anything, right? I believe that people come, if you think best intent, right? If we're all trying to move the community forward, then we can have hard, honest conversations, which we need to do to sort of understand where we're coming from, find a collective and move forward. Pilot projects, right? Let's try something, right? Let's sort of see what happens. Hey, it didn't work. But what did we learn? Or it did work. Let's expand it, right? And then dynamic Marin, right? I want a Marin that's dynamic, inclusive, and forward thinking. I have to say, like an incredible, perfect partner for that is Mayor Kate. I've known her from years. She has like the vision and the ability and the chops, the intelligence, and really just a commitment to the community that inspires me to do this work. Because I know at the county level, I retain an incredible partner at the city level. And with that, I'm done. Mayor Kate, it's all you. Thank you.
Oh, hey. Okay, whoops, I go the right way. I can assure you, I won't do as many jokes as Supervisor Colbert, because I just am not that funny. So thank you for having me. Thank you for having us. And I was reflecting on your slides because I got to see them before you all got to see them. And what I really like about the conversation that we're having, and I know it's a conversation, but we're kind of talking at you, so apologize for that. There will be room for conversation. But Supervisor Colbert has a really big picture, right? And really, what does that look like? The vision and where are we going? And I realize that my slides are much more granular. How's that manifested? There's some very similar elements, but how is it manifested? So I'm going to talk to you today about what you had talked about in the introduction. We're going to talk about some wildfire prevention, sea level rise, homelessness, housing, and new investments. Each of those subjects are very dense. So you're getting the whirlwind, high level. And if you have questions, we'll take them at the end. We also have a little bit of government 101. Because what we find is when we go out and talk to people, they're not quite sure who represents them. So San Rafael, we now have 4 directly elected council members in 4 different districts. I'm the only mayor that is directly elected in Marin County. Everybody else rotates for a year. So it does enable San Rafael to have a long time horizon to do the planning and initiatives over the 4 years, because it's not like a new person. It takes a while to get up to speed in this gig. So I serve with, right now, Mary Beth Bushy is my vice mayor, Councilmember Rachel Kurtz, Councilmember Eli Hill, Councilmember Lorenz Gulati. Councilmember Lorenz Gulati is the first Hispanic councilwoman to serve on the city of San Rafael. Okay, how do I get my services? Supervisor alluded to this, and it has to do with partnerships, but it also happens to do with who do I call when this thing happens? And you said 311, right? That's a great thing that Boston does, because this is all the places that you get your services. And when I go out and I'm at United Market and I'm picking out my fruit and people are like, hey, Mayor Kate, I want to talk to you about And sometimes that subject is something that I don't have direct jurisdiction over. I know people who do. So this is a really important part of the conversation when we talk to community. And the city has great relationships with all the folks that are on here, the county, the schools, infrastructure, marine sanitary. But this is this is when you're going about your day-to-day life, these are all the agencies with whom you're interacting, whether you are aware or not. I'm going to jump right into wildfire, and very much a topical topic, given what happened down in Los Angeles. I'm big on pictures, and there's only one slide that has a lot of text on it. So these are the goats. We all love goats, right? It's a great way to do the vegetation management. They're super cool. One of my big ideas is, how do we buy a herd of goats and have them make cheese? Like, there's a whole thing there. See if they put your whole vision thing. So, stay tuned on that. Every time I mention it, we have a new fire chief, and he just looks at me. I'm like, what? The last chief wasn't interested, but maybe Chief Roman will have a San Rafael goat cheese. Okay. So wildfire mitigation, this has been on everybody's mind. What happened in Los Angeles was breathtaking. I have two friends who lost everything. So I know from both a personal and a professional level. There were a lot of questions that I received via email after that. How do we prevent that from happening here? I'm here to tell you that this county is unique in the state of California because we willingly taxed ourselves through Measure C back in 2020, and it created the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. With those funds, we've been able to do deep vegetation management in places that basically has had vegetation growth, well, for hundreds of years. We have divides between Terra Linda and downtown proper. There's Sleepy Hollow has some huge clearing. So this will set us apart, because wildfire is a part of our natural environment. We know that we've suppressed it for many years. So that what we want is, when and if it happens, there's an ignition source that our firefighters and our professionals can get there and extinguish it really quickly. This is all partnership work. The Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority has all the cities and towns, majority of them. And it's really, how do we come together and make the decisions based on priorities and not just boundaries, right? Not just boundaries. It's been incredibly successful in San Rafael. We've been able to hire vegetation specific management people. And I meant to bring my door hanger, because the City of San Rafael has had people that go to every single house in San Rafael, and you get a little door hanger that has your wildfire report. And it gives you the information to follow up on that. And just so you know, this past week and the week before, we held in San Rafael 2 wildfire prevention community meetings. Each one was an hour long, so I could go an hour on this, but I'm not. I'm going to keep whipping along. The other part about managing wildfire is what our professionals do, right? They're doing all the work to prevent it. The reality is, with some of these big mega fires or even a disaster, we simply do not. No community has enough emergency personnel. So it's, what is your role? What is my role? And everything from your home hardening to knowing your neighbors. And I said hi to Pat when I walked in. Pat and I met because she had reached out to me via email. This was years ago, about some concern around fire prevention. We both live in the Sun Valley neighborhood. I was on the council at the time. I was not mayor. And I thought, that's interesting. Let's meet. Tell me more. And we sat down, and she talked about the FireWise program. And I would never ask anyone in my community to do something that I haven't personally done. And so we participated and created a FireWise neighborhood in our community. So I know what it entails, and it is effective, and it's efficient, and it's a great way to know your neighbors, right? And if they're inherent, the whole success of Fire Safe Marin in these programs is by someone raising their hand saying, I'm going to take the lead on that. So if you're not in a FireWise community and you want to be one, you want to be disaster preparedness, all of that, raise your hand. And that's a way that you can show up around wildfire prevention that will benefit our entire community. If you haven't already signed up for Alert Marin and Nixle, do that. Those are the tools that are used here in Marin County to alert you from, and they don't overuse it, trust me. Nixle is used by the police department for local, if there's a bad traffic accident. Alert Marin is the broader alerts. Okay, I'm just whipping right along. We're going to go from the fire to the sea. If you don't know already, the Canal neighborhood is the first neighborhood in the entire Bay Area to be inundated by sea level rise. And if you're familiar with San Rafael, you know that parts of the canal also has our largest immigrant community. People may not be native English speakers. We have low income folks. So how do we go over those cultural or language barriers and make sure that people recognize that sea level rise is an issue? The pictures, both of these pictures had to do with big rainy storms that happened. Our infrastructure can only take so much. You do have water when it comes down off the hills, plus the natural water that's already going through our system. And so these were two floods that had happened, or flooding areas. San Rafael has upgraded our pump system in order to get at this. In the canal, most of the buildings are actually below the sea level. And there are community events that you can participate in and actually see that. What's interesting about this, we recently upgraded our pump station. We were able to do that because of the dollars from President Biden from the American Rescue, or ARPA dollars, American Rescue Plan allocation. And San Rafael received about $16 million from that. We were able to upgrade one of our pump stations that was over $2.5 million. These pump stations are huge and old and expensive to fix. So, okay, where are we? So sea level, right? So we do a lot of community involvement on this. That top-down government, and you really heard this from Supervisor Colbert, how are we as a community bringing in people and engaging so we have the best outcomes for everyone? Historically, government was top-down. People would go off into a room and they'd say, this is the solution for the community and you're gonna love it. The problem with that is, there are many problems with that. One, if you don't actually have the lived experience of people that are there, you're actually missing out on some of the wisdom and some of the ideas. Two, if you're asking people to change their behavior or to invest in their property, if they haven't already bought in and weren't part of the solution, they're going to be a lot more resistant in helping to execute that decision. In San Rafael, we're really focusing on adaptation and mitigation. This is both because it's the right thing to do, and there was a recent law 2 years ago passed by the state government that requires a regional shoreline adaptation plan with the terrible acronym RSAP. And I have been one of the elected officials that's been on the RSAP ad hoc committee at BCDC, so I can really talk to you ad nauseum about that plan. But it's important to be thinking about how are we making decisions today that get us in a good situation going forward. Always with all of these issues, so we have the collaborative, I'll go back to this one. With all these issues, the issue is funding. These infrastructure projects are expensive. So you need to be, the decisions that you make today and the projects you're doing today need to be built upon for the future ones. You can't do them all at once. We're very proud of the fact that we have a sea level rise collaborative. When I was talking about how do you engage your local community, with our partners, the Canal Alliance, who have been incredible, the city has received with our partners about $1.5 million to engage the public about nature-based solutions. And I think, Jeff Rhodes, you've been a part of those, I think on the technical advisory. And it has been incredible. There might be others that have been part of that. It's been incredible, both from an engagement standpoint and from actually starting to talk about adaptation and mitigation from people that are going to be directly affected. In addition to Canal Alliance, it also has the County of Marin and UC Berkeley. That is what that looks like going forward. These types of complex solutions need many partners. The city alone can't solve it. The county alone can't solve it. It's really all of us coming together. Okay, switching along. Homelessness and housing. If we had 2 hours, I would only just scratch the surface talking about these two issues. So I'm going to do a very high level, but I know when I go out and talk to people, one of the first things they always want to talk about is homelessness. Encampments are a symptom of homelessness. And so the majority of homeless people in our community, the broad community, are people you don't even see, right? But the encampments remind us, and they have a real impact on our community. So San Rafael we have passed 5 separate ordinances regulating different regulating camping in the city of San Rafael. So when I became mayor in 2020 during COVID, it was a dire situation. And we had some pretty big encampments that had many calls for service to police and fire. Not acceptable. Since that time, we passed 5 ordinances. We've been sued every time. The last lawsuit we were under a temporary restraining order for over a year. We only started to be able to implement that ordinance regulating time, place, and manner in the summer of last year. So we're just getting started on providing a more robust safety net. Part of that safety net in the city of San Rafael is a Mahone Creek Path camping area. The reason this site was selected is where folks already were. I mean, and again, when you talk about what's the problem we're trying to solve, that it was a complete disaster down there. The calls for service in Mahone were really problematic. People were not getting the support that they needed. With the county of Marin, we applied for at the state and received nearly $6 million to have a sanctioned camping area. And let me be clear, housing is what we want. We want permanent supportive housing with services. Let's just be clear. That is the holy grail. The reality is homelessness is very complex, and having more solutions that people might be able to access is better. So a sanctioned tent area is one thing. I'm a big believer in tiny homes, and Supervisor Colbert is now going to start hearing that from me a lot. His other supervisors have been hearing that for a while. How do we have that as part of our safety net? The Mahone encampment has 50 people in it. And I learned today that 25% of the people that are there are under case management. If you're unhoused, for you to take the next step to get housing, to get your documents, everything else, you've got to have case management. That has to be the first step. And in the meeting I had this afternoon, I was like, 25%, I thought we wanted to be closer to 100. And they said, okay, Mayor Kate, you have to remember this opened up in November. And so they are just getting going. We have enough funding for about for 18 months. And their goal is to get to 100% in the next, I'm hoping in the next couple months, because then people can start taking the next steps. We have in the City of San Rafael something called the SAFE team, which is specialized assistance for everyone. It's a mobile mental health crisis unit. The County of Marin has a mobile mental health crisis unit. When we went to look at the data, that team was not able to go deep enough into San Rafael. They were covering the entire county. Those ARPA dollars that I mentioned that help the pump station, they help fund our SAFE team. It's a number that any of you can call. I even wrote it down here, 415-458-7233. The last four letters are the word SAFE, 458-SAFE. Anyone can call it. And you know what? You call it and someone picks up the phone. Our SAFE team is around 12 hours a day, every single day of the year. They have a trauma-informed approach. So you would call them if you see someone acting really irrationally or scary or dancing in the middle of the street on 4th Street, you call the SAFE team. You can also call the police. This team, they can work with the individual one-on-one. They can help connect them to services. Of course, you can always call 911 if you see something that is frightening or appropriate to call the police. You can also call 911 and say, I need the SAFE team, but I can't remember the number. I heard it from Mayor Kate, and they'll come out. And the SAFE team has been so well received. The calls for service, the numbers that they have been able to handle that the police haven't, has been, I wish I had that number off my head, but it's been much higher than we thought it would be, but really, really effective. One thing I want to mention that was sobering. So when we talk about mental health, and we talk about it more as a community, thank you, COVID, as we all talked about it. We designed and we paid for SAFE because we were thinking, oh, this will support the unhoused community primarily. And we found out another segment of the population was using this number, and that was students, because they didn't know who to call. So we're working with the schools, and that funding, we'll see what happens. The federal government has indicated that funding might go away, but middle schoolers and high schoolers, because, and just so you know, this SAFE number, it's not just for the unhoused. Anyone in here can use it. If you were having a neighbor an issue, you can call that number this evening, and a member of the SAFE team would come and support you. So that to me is like, wow, how do we continue to expand our mental health services to our entire community? On the right-hand side is Lynn Murphy. If you walk downtown, eat downtown, shop downtown, you'll see her. She's a trained psychologist, and she helps link folks with services on the street. We are the only community in Marin County that has someone like Lynn, and she's been transformational in helping people get off the streets into housing. Here are all our partners. None of this is done in a vacuum. And I realized that as I was looking at the slide this afternoon, that the other, and it's not really a logo that I would have put up there, would have been the community. Right. So this work, yes, these are the people that are providing the services, doing the policy, but having the community say, you know what, yeah, Mayor Kate, you know, we're frustrated too, but hey, we support you in these policies that you're trying to put forward, and let me get on Nextdoor. Okay, good luck with that. But let me get on Nextdoor and actually put out real information and not misinformation. Because that's all I read on Nextdoor about homelessness is misinformation. So I'm not going to read these numbers to you, but the point of it being, San Rafael and Marin County, we actually are willing to try new things. When Supervisor Colbert was talking about pilot programs, vision, trying things that are new. That's what we've done with our sanctioned camping area. The working together, that's what our service providers have done with Homeward Bound. So we are continuing to see successes here. I realize that this says affordable housing, but these are actually images of units that are specifically for unhoused individuals. These are coming online. Jonathan Place on the right-hand side is Homeward Bound. It's both shelter as well as permanent supportive housing. We are investing in our community to have folks have a place to go once they're prepared to get off the street. Okay, whip through this last part so we have time for questions. New development investment. I'm thrilled to tell you that because of our geographic location, because San Rafael is so beautiful, because we have such wonderful residents, people want to invest here, people want to be here. So how do we nurture that? How do we have the type of investment and growth that we're really excited about? Housing. So as you may know, over the past many decades, California has not built the number of housing units needed to keep up with job growth. So the state said, okay, we've been asking you to build this stuff, all you counties and cities, and you haven't. So now what we're going to do is pass some laws that streamline a decision-making, and another way to say loosen up local control. Because of that, we have projects coming in that, and I can tell you, if it makes my jaw drop, and I've been doing this work for 15 years, 20 years, it's gonna make your jaw drop. And I mention that because our community, San Rafael, is going to change. It's gonna look different. We're gonna have taller buildings. And as once we recognize that and come at peace with that, that taller building means we're gonna have our kids be able to stay here. I have two grown kids. One lives in the South Bay, she's going to school. The other one lives in Chicago. They can't afford to live here, right? And when you have people downtown, they're gonna be shopping downtown, eating downtown, and we're gonna have just as many restaurants, if not more, and they're full and filled with people. So these are all different developments that are coming online. These ones have all been formally submitted. Look at those pictures, like take a deep breath. I look at these and I'm still like, ooh. And I did write it down because I want you to feel this the way that I feel it and to really understand and to envision how the community is going to look different. And it's going to be okay. We're going to be okay because we're going to have, it means that people want to invest here. So 800, oh wait, I'm sorry, I'm not on the right one. Here we go. 930 Irwin. So formally submitted just means that they put the papers in, but it doesn't mean that the city has had the back and forth with them. The back and forth is way more limited, as I mentioned, because of the state. So let me just tell you this, Irwin Street, 8 stories, 213 units. 4th Street and Grand, 5 stories, 35 units. 555 North Gate, 7 stories, 250 units. Dominican Valley, which is right up here, 50 units. 1230 Fifth Avenue, 12 stories, 189 units. Over the holidays, I was with my kids, which is always great to be with them. And I was telling them, like, oh my God, because I had a similar presentation that was, I was on the receiving end from staff in December. And I couldn't even sleep that night. I mean, this is really blowing my mind of how different San Rafael is going to look in 15 years. And so I was bemoaning to the kids, like, I can't get my head around it. And my kids listened and listened. And my son just said, you know, Mom, if I lived in the community, I would come to your meeting and tell you, yeah, you build this. And it was just so interesting because it made me realize, and Supervisor Colbert talked about listening to others or bringing others into the conversation. And that was really eye-opening. And I was like, okay, well, you live in Chicago. Do you have friends that still live in the area that they can come to meetings? Because the people that come to meetings are people that have been here a long time, like myself, who are older, who are homeowners, and I might have a set viewpoint. And how do we have those additional viewpoints? So I'm almost done. We continue to invest in the downtown. If you haven't gone to the Marin Museum of Contemporary Art, super cool. It's right across from the AC Marriott. That's the museum that's up in Nevada, and now they have a pop-up there. And a lot of investment. And when people say to me, oh my God, Mary Kate, what are you going to do about the empty buildings in 4th Street? I take a deep breath because I'm a half glass full kind of gal. And I look at it, I'm like, when you bought your last book, you bought it at Copperfield's, right? And then they're like, start to look down. When you bought your last puzzle or game, you went to Gamescape, right? And now they just want to walk away from me. But my point being, by investing, it means us showing up in our downtown. We have a lot of great new stores that have come in, Pilates, all sorts of wonderful things. So it'll succeed by all of us for taking them. So I'll stop there. Okay, we're good. We left some time for questions and answers.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are ready to roll with Q&A. I want to just announce, by the way, we have a little book offering out there for you. Barry Fegan, who's here, right over there, has brought some copies of his recent book, Conflict, Meetings, and Difficult People, not talking about any of us, the essential guide for members of California's local communities. So it's right out in the front if anybody wants to grab that on the way out. Okay. I'm gonna bring the mic around and we have questions. Just raise your hand. I'll get to you in a sec, but we'll start with you.
Just quickly, I love the idea of everyone needing to get used to the idea of infill. And that we need, but the way to get vibrant downtowns is more people downtown, which means higher buildings and, get over yourself, right? But what you reminded me of when you said that is we also need to get used to houses looking different. I watched a presentation the other day by our fire chief in Novato. And he was talking about the zone, the 0 to 5 feet from your home and how that needs to be xeriscape, I guess they call it. But zone zero. So we need to get used to, we don't have all those pretty little bushes around our houses anymore. We need to just get used to, it's a new day. So in both those areas, we need to change our thinking. That's all. Thank you.
Any reactions?
No, I think so thank you for that. And I'm the first to say, it's hard to have change. I mean, change is comfortable, right? And so how do we, I think the way that we recognize and let our community evolve is by having these conversations and to also engage in it. So as it changes, like, oh yeah, I was a part of figuring out what plants we can plant within 10 feet until you feel invested in that. But no, I appreciate that.
Okay, question over here.
Comment on sea level rise. I'm a geologist, by the way. Over there in San Francisco, they have a sea level rise station with a continuous record that goes back 176 years. And when you plot all that information up, and it's on NOAA's website, it's a dead straight line right up to the present day, with the sea level rising at 2 millimeters per year. And the expectation is that will continue. That equates to about 1 foot 12 inches every 150 years. Now, we've lived in Tiburon for 30 years, and I've been to any number of meetings where they've discussed sea level rise and what we're going to do about it. But there are a whole bunch of amateurs with their oars in the water in this, and very little has been done, other than upgrading your pumps.
Yeah, so I'll push back a little bit on that because and I'll have to come up with the website. When we first started talking about sea level rise, I've been working on this issue since I joined the council in 2013. There was a lot of discussion around if it's going to rise, how much it's going to rise, all of that. So I hear you and I understand where that is coming from. And the way we respond now is, yes, it will rise. And depending on which scenario, how are we going to be reacting? And for us to sit here, if we get it wrong, if we get it wrong, then we will literally be inundated. And I do also want to mention, I can't speak to where you personally, but I can tell you in the canal right now, we're already below, as I said, sea level, current sea level. And actually, you can talk to Dave after, because you remember that website that I cannot remember. It's the one that shows the waters coming up.
There's a number of different ones.
Yeah, so so the two of you, when we're done, you guys go and talk about that.
Okay, I'd just like your response to a recommendation, and that is all the cities in North Bay get together and they hire a small group of civil marine engineers from Holland. They've been fighting the egress of sea for hundreds of years because the whole country is sinking. And they would come up, I would guess, in 3 or 4 months with a North Bay wide plan on practical measures to take.
Thank you.
All right, question over here, I think. Yes, no? Do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, yeah. A couple of comments. The first is, if you are interested in seeing what San Rafael may look like, it would not be a poor use of your time to go down and look at Redwood City. Because in fact, they have experienced what we are going to experience. And they have a number of buildings downtown that are 11, 12 stories in height and a substantial amount of housing downtown. That housing has really changed the nature of the place. But they also have implemented a very, very clear vision about historic preservation. So what they've done is they keep the authenticity of the place by preserving the best of the historic buildings in the city. At the same time, building really fairly nice, larger buildings. Their downtown was in far worse shape than ours. And it's doing quite well today. It's quite worth seeing. The other thing, I guess I'd like to address to our elected representatives here is, it seems to me that when we address something like sea level rise, we're dealing with a very, very challenging, sticky problem that's going to require long-term solutions. And as we've looked at this in San Rafael, we can see that there are a number of different solutions, and it's difficult to arrive at what the right solution is. One wonders if this problem really requires more than just our city, but perhaps engagement of the private sector, the nonprofit sector, in looking at perhaps a visioning process for a whole shoreline that isn't so much focused on risk avoidance, but more on a vision of how can we create a great shore. Because after all, what motivates people are things that affect their quality of life. And if what we're doing is we're focusing on providing better access to the shoreline, a continuous bay trail from Richmond San Rafael Bridge to China Camp, better maritime opportunities, wetlands restoration, those are the things that people will get behind. If our shoreline plan, our vision, and we could use the Envision Utah process as a model, is to create this world-class shoreline, now you have people advocating for implementation for things they really care about. Anyway.
Great point.
Just a thought.
All right, we're going over there. Any thoughts or reactions on any of that? If not, we can go to the next couple of questions. All right, we'll come back in a second.
Hi. So we have, we hear about some changes in terms of, from the federal government, in terms of grants and financing and money that has in the past gone to help cities and counties and states in regard to a lot of areas, a lot of functions that government is involved with. And I'm wondering, it seems to me also with the tariffs, I'm thinking that the housing or the building that's in plans or is I have a feeling that there already are or will be major changes in how the financing needs to work, or that they become too expensive to be built, or they're waiting. I'm just wondering, maybe it's too soon to be asking this question, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts are or what's being discussed. Also, you know, healthcare, transportation, it's across the board. So I'm talking about tariffs, but I'm also talking about cessation of grants and other money. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, it's me. So,
Both of you.
no, I'll lead off and then Mary Kay will fix everything I get wrong. So I will say that it's a concern and that any number of our, at the county, our agencies like TAM, we are closely following what's going on at the federal government. But the reality is, I don't think that most people know more than what you're reading about in the paper, right? I mean, I think any number of people, certainly I expected this, right? I expected, the sort of flood the zone. In 2016, people might claim to have been shocked. Personally, I'm not sure how they're shocked in 2024. Like they said that they said this is what they would do, and this is what they're attempting to do. That sort of intellectual approach, however, I know is incredibly difficult. I know friends right now that are in charge of nonprofits, and the level of uncertainty is challenging. Certainly when you're cutting programs that are helping truly the most vulnerable in the United States and around the world, those are real world effects that cannot easily be reversed. I tend to think, frankly, that the end game, I think though most of this is actually sort of shiny ball stuff. I think the reality is what will come when the unitary executive theory hits the Supreme Court. And for those of you that haven't followed it, right, like that is the theory that has been talked about for a while, but really was birthed after Watergate. And certain people in the United States sort of thought that the president has the power to sort of manage the executive bureaucracy, the bureaucracy as it were, unilaterally. It was revisited under Reagan. And so I actually tend to think, people say, oh, look at all these court cases. I think the reason there's a lot of court cases because people think they have a favorable Supreme Court. And that when and if that decision is reached, and I think it will come sooner than later, then the chips will really fall. As for right now, I think certainly at the county level, we're keeping a close watch on that and trying to certainly keep open lines of communication with our cities and towns. I mean, I think for right now, we are okay, whatever okay means sort of budgetarily and providing services to people, but we are certainly being mindful and rationing our resources. And I think sort of expecting the worst.
And I'll just add on, this is on everyone's mind. I do a Zoom call with my 91-year-old mom every week. And last night she was like, so is this gonna affect San Rafael? And I said, well, it ultimately, really what Supervisor Colbert is saying, it could affect all of us, but we don't know how. We don't know how the chips are going to fall. So sitting here now, it is looking at the projects that may be at risk or the funding that's at risk. So San Rafael, the funding that we receive is through the county, it's through the state. We don't tend to get direct federal funding on very many projects, but we do get matching funding. And so we're identifying the projects that could be at risk. We're prioritizing, just trying to figure out, are there other sources of funding at the state level? Or is the time of the when those projects are going to be executed, can that be modified? And if additional dollars don't come down, the Bettini Transit Center, we talk about ginormous infrastructure projects that we've been working on as a community. There's some that can only go forward with federal funding. It just can only go forward. And these infrastructure projects have really long time horizons. And if they outlast, the 4 years of maybe constrained funding. So it is a really uncertain time. And all of us feel that uncertainty, and we're talking about it in terms of funding. In San Rafael, in the Canal community, we have many, many immigrants. They're feeling the uncertainty in a really, really different way. And to me, the antidote of all of it is to have these conversations, to be showing up as a community saying, I'm going to keep doing my community work. I'm going to keep doing my city work, keep doing the county work. We're going to keep doing the initiatives and the programs that are in front of us to the best of our abilities until we can. So we serve because we believe in the public good. That's why we do this work every single day. That has not changed. That has not changed. Our commitment has not changed.
The tariffs may impact developers being able to get materials to build, or the prices are so high that they may just not be building according to what's the plan, what we're all thinking.
Absolutely. Tariffs could have an impact. There's also the financing element of it. So yeah, 100%.
Okay, our next question over here.
I'm profoundly concerned about our environment and from the point of view that this is beautiful bucolic Marin, but every year it dries out quite a bit. And the Diablo winds come whipping through here. And the fire agencies aren't going to be able to put out the big fires. So it turns out that we have to make a change, and where we're gonna be with this change down the road begins with education. So we're gonna go from a beautiful bucolic landscape to a moonscape if we're not careful around here. And for whom the bell tolls, every county around here is burned significantly. We haven't yet. So the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority has done a tremendous job. But we gotta get more scratch in the game because they can't do it. It's not about the money on that level. There's hopefully enough there. It's gotta be from the other side. People have to buy in. They have to get some scratch in the game. If they're not going to do their part with mitigation by zero landscaping, pyrophytic plants around them, the canopy trees that they're so pyrophytic also, we got big problems. So my question to you, is how are you going to educate people? How are you getting that message out to them? Because when I grew up, the newspaper was my principal way of getting out there. But now, everybody's, you were telling me, you're not a podster, but you're picking up information from them. How are we gonna get out there? And how are we gonna get this information to them? Because they're gonna have to be motivated before their barbecue.
So, great insight, because you can't take the action if you don't know the action you need to take. So I have two parts to that answer. One is, there is very much an interest, so I hear you saying, oh, people don't know enough, they're not educated. Trust me, people are seeking out the information, if not through their Firewise community, it is through the cities and towns. And so, as I said, we had 2 community fire meetings this past week, and MWPA, Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, had several. So the information is out there, and what we're hoping to do in San Rafael, so people don't have to sit through an hour meeting. It was really good, though, I have to tell you, an hour went by quickly, but how do you have the information that you need to take the action that you need to take? And if you're not taking the action and you haven't done the work on your door hanger, so far we do a lot of encouragement. We're big on carrots, you want to do this for all the right reasons. There will start to be more stringent enforcement if people are not doing their home hardening. That's just reality.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think the insurance companies are gonna provide all the incentive that homeowners need, like that's kind of it, right? Right, that's it, right? You talk to people, they are concerned about their insurance rates, they're concerned about their loss of insurance. But at the same time, I know that there's work being done by a friend and partner in Sacramento, Assemblymember Damon Conley. Like, how do you incentivize people to do this, right? Like, it's sort of it's a classic collective action problem. I have done what I've done on my home, but how do I get my neighbor to move off the dime? The insurance company is going to get them to move. I mean, the reality is, the information is pretty transparent right now. Fair, the home insurer of last resort, is now $1 billion short. That $1 billion coming out of our pockets, right? So I think ultimately there will be some kind of restructuring of home insurance, fire insurance in the state of California, and hopefully it will incentivize to take those individual actions, which will collectively make us safer and hopefully be reflected in our home insurance rates.
One other thing I'll point out from the perspective of someone who's involved in the Firewise organization, and Stephen can obviously talk a lot more about that than I can, but there are grant programs depending on where you live. So anywhere in the county, you are eligible to apply for the grants through the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, MWPA. And then also, if you live in a city such as San Rafael has a grant program. And as a Firewise leader myself, I've been working on trying to get that information out to my community and let them know what is available to them for that purpose. But it's a carrot and stick thing. As Brian points out, the insurance companies are going to be kicking us in the rear end in the future. And also there will be increased enforcement, as Mayor Kate has talked about. I just read about a law that Gavin Newsom signed 2 weeks ago, I think, setting forth a statewide requirement of maintaining a zone 0 around every house in the state of California. Maybe somebody can talk about that. So those are the sticks. The grants are the carrots, And there's a whole lot more that's gonna be going on, but it's definitely an evolving situation. Stephen?
Thank you both very much. This has been an enjoyable and enlightening conversation. And wildfire is clearly an important issue, but I wanted to focus on the other major topic. Thank you. Amazing, yes, thank you. The other topic that came up, which is homelessness. And the transformation, I think that you talked about. Fairfax is, we live in Fairfax, and Fairfax is dealing with that issue. We're about to have our first 6-story building
Not yet.
in the middle.
It's
of town.
8, I think it's 8, but yeah.
Yeah, or whatever it is. At any rate, it will transform us, yes. But, and I'm talking about homelessness in Fairfax and in general around the county. It seems that a lot of people focus on the county providing a larger context for it, that each little town on their own can deal with some of it, but not the location of housing, the services that are needed. We're mobile, bunch of people, and our homeless population really is too. They go, they talk to each other, they know where's a place that can hang out, camp out if necessary. And I guess I'm wondering what, Brian, you all are gonna deal with at the county level to provide a big picture vision of dealing with homelessness and not just leave it up to Kate and towns and others.
I'm gonna jump in only, and then we'll let Supervisor, only because I started working on this issue in 2013. So I have to say that the county partnership is critical to any solution going forward, and the county is providing that vision. What I hear is how are cities and towns recognizing their own individual roles and responsibilities going forward. And Fairfax, just for those that don't know, did pass an ordinance that basically banned camping in Fairfax, which I just morally, I don't agree with that, but that's a whole other conversation. They are under a temporary restraining order right now from Judge Lynn. So we will see, we've been down that path. But the bigger question is, how are we working together? And you're right, the county has access to funds, they have health and human services. Most importantly, they have the expertise. I don't have folks that work in social services. And what's been really incredible about the Mahone Path example that I gave you, we co-applied, the City of San Rafael co-applied with the County of Marin for that $6 million. That's what that partnership looks like going forward. And I would even expand that ultimately to have the private sector come in as well. And so to your point, Fairfax, which is much smaller, financially much smaller, what's the skin in the game that they're going to have? And that conversation will start to be had. Right now, I'm just trying to keep Fairfax and Novato at the table in terms of the conversation, but you bring up a really good point about for success, it's going to take everybody coming into the table.
I think the only comments I would make were on a certain level, just to reiterate what you were talking about. Certainly in the cities and towns, and I haven't been working on this as long, but you and I have had frequent conversations. I think it's, as Kate earlier alluded to, right, most of the state and federal money, it gets funneled through the county, right? But the reality is sort of talking about, you talked earlier about lived in experience, the cities and towns are the one who are actually sort of dealing with it on the ground. So it's that real connectivity and partnership between the county to sort of say, hey, look, San Rafael or Fairfax or San Anselmo, or whatever community is, what is it you need? How do we help structure this money so it can be effective? And at the same time, I earlier alluded to, right, it's not only the money, but the resources are at the county. So there is something to be said about a centralization of institutional knowledge and research and simply bodies and capability at the county level. So I mean, HHS, I know it's sort of top of mind. Homelessness, right, is a moral imperative for many people, as it should be. So I think that level of partnership can only grow. And I certainly, I know that my colleagues and the folks at HHS are committed to that. to addressing homelessness. Marin County recently ended veterans homelessness. And so kudos to everyone involved in that. So at this point, I just be repeating what Kate said. So great question, and we'll keep working at it.
All right, we're getting close to the end. Time for a couple more questions, so we'll get to you in a sec, and then Alan.
Everyone agrees that the cities and counties have been remiss in building housing, sufficient housing over many years. For one reason or another. And everyone agrees that we have the need for affordable housing, though I really dislike that term because every house is affordable for somebody. What we need is low income housing, and the conundrum is that while there's a great demand for low income housing, the supply can't be done because there's not an affordability to build low income housing. Cost of construction, cost of materials, et cetera, make that impossible without some kind of subsidy. Yet nobody is talking about any kind of federal, state, or local subsidies, or the funds where that would come from, to actually solve that problem. And it's not going to get solved without subsidies. Any comments on it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Funding is always critical when you're building any type of infrastructure. So one of the houses that I showed up there, but I went through because I wanted to get to this part of the conversation, is 3301 Kerner. That is a office building that will be converted. I think it's 40 units. I have the number here, and it is 100% affordable, and it's for formerly unhoused people. The funding worked out on that for a couple of reasons. One is the business owner or the property owner gave it to the developer for like $1. It wasn't $1, but for some really small amount of money. And Eden Housing is the one that ran around to the feds, the state. San Rafael we gave over $1 million into that project. And it's both the availability of the funding, but it's the complexity of the funding. And that's what's really difficult. And Bridge, Eden, EAH have figured out how to do that, but as long as that funding is so complex, it's going to be very, very difficult to build it. You couldn't be more accurate in that.
Okay, anything, Brian, on that, or keep going?
No, keep going.
Okay.
Okay, great. Is it on? Okay, my name's Holly Thier. I'm mayor of Tiburon. And I just want to take a moment to thank Marin Coalition. I don't know how you got so many people out in the storm, but I think all of us who are here are very grateful both to Mayor Kate, who's an inspiration for all leaders, especially women leaders locally and statewide, and also Brian, who is moving into his new position with grace and coming up with just ideas that have never been thought of before at the county, which I think is going to be great. So my question, and we're lucky to have them both, they are truly exemplify what public leadership is. I wanted to ask the question about how do you see, it kind of came up a little bit, but how do you see the county and the cities working on, the three issues we've really talked about today, sea level rise, housing, fire. We already have something in place, except for my town is not part of it, unfortunately, but there is hope. We're getting a new fire chief. How do you see the county really working with the cities and towns working back with the county on some of these issues that affect every part in every city in Marin?
That's not a question for San Rafael, but
Yeah.
it's okay. So, I think some of the threads that we talked about earlier come into play, right? So the Marin IJ, had sea level rise as a $17 billion play. That's a lot of money, right? Yeah, 17 billion, right? So in order to figure out how to stitch together $17 billion, that's really the county partnering with our cities and towns. And again, with our friends and allies in Sacramento and federally to sort of leverage that money, but then figure out with our cities and towns, how to execute it properly. I think there's actually a really interesting idea that just came, I think, last week, that the Army Corps of Engineers is actually finally going to look at the whole North Bay, holistically in terms of sea level rise, right? And to me, that's a real opportunity, and that's where the county is best placed to aggregate all the voices of our cities and towns, our various nonprofits, our business community, to speak with one voice. Because with a project that big, we need and have to speak with one voice on something like that. I think in terms of housing, again, I think one of the challenges that we've had, right, and coming from the private sector, right, like housing is housing, right? Sometimes it can't be built, right? There's any number of challenges right now, but for any number of people, money's expensive right now, right? People haven't seen these interest rates since the days of Paul Volcker. They just don't know what to do, right? So even aside from all the other stuff is real, like soft costs, permitting costs on the part of the county, but capital is simply a challenge for people to build anything. But I do think one of the things that as a county, we're really trying to figure out with, and it's a challenge, right? To be fair, and I'm not gonna say I have an answer, but it's something we need to be thoughtful about. Given the challenges that we have around wildfire, given the fact that there will be a fire here, given the fact, however, that we know we need to, and I agree with you, provide housing for certain members of our community. How do we do that while balancing the need to be able to provide safety for people in terms of evacuation? Is it responsible to build housing in the wildland urban interface area, right? And that's not an NIMBY take, right? It really is a question of safety. Is it morally responsible to provide housing for someone in a place that they really can't evacuate in terms of any kind of disaster? One must be thoughtful about that, right? And I just think that the county is best placed, as Mayor Kate alluded to earlier, to have those thoughtful conversations, not necessarily even convene, but execute in partnership. Kate, would you like to follow up on that?
I'll take it from the other side, so that, yeah, from the county, and we live, and I know we're at time, but we live in a county that has 11 independent cities and towns. Let's just sit with that for a moment. And while I have had the opportunity to meet the other elected officials, and I know Holly and the great work that she's doing, how do we have the cities and towns to engage on an issue that they might not think they need to engage on? Like, we talk about homelessness, and it is eternally frustrating to me. There'll be a town that I won't name, Ross, who said, we don't have homelessness here, and one of their policymakers said that. And it was all I could do not to respond. Actually, the gentleman that has been staying near City Hall, who's unhoused, grew up in Ross. So the point being, how do we get out of that very myopic, siloed way of thinking for all the issues that you raised? And I think that's challenging. I do think that's challenging, and I think it's something that we can continue to work on as a broader community, because it's all hands on deck for these really, really difficult issues. It cannot be solved by one entity alone.
All right, I know we're out of time. I promised our friend Jack Gashai, last question. Jack, by the way, is our presenter in March, along with Jim Coda. The two of them will be here in a couple of weeks to talk about Point Reyes and the seashore. So go ahead, Jack.
Thank you both for coming. Is this recording, by the way? I don't really need a mic unless it's recording, in which case, okay. So it's a comment, and then I guess I want you guys' input to see whether you agree or disagree with what I'm saying. Again, thank you for being here and subjecting yourself to the public. It's kind of what this gentleman said about his love for trees, as I have coming from New York, which is why I know where Bethel is and how to pronounce it, Mr. Colbert. And I am afraid for trees, not of trees. So once you start getting people afraid of fire, which is kind of going rampant now and understandably so, like, ooh, those trees could burn and burn this building down. And then it's not just a matter of protecting this house here from nearby structures. I lived in Fairfax up a hill. I mean, I'm just weaving together all this stuff, and it's like, if this place catches fire, we're doomed. And if you live there, you live with that. Other than saying we're going to cut down all the trees in so much Marin County, and before that I lived 9 years in West Marin County, I'm getting to a point. There's a difference between defensible space, which is usually 10, 20, 30 feet, it can be up to 100 feet, but not in Fairfax, you cut down every tree, or San Geronimo, where I lived for 9 years, there is no defense there, to your point, Brian. And then there's home hardening techniques, which you spoke about, Mayor Collins. And I'm just terrified, there's work up on Point Reyes, in Mount Tam, of course, in the East Bay. Eucalyptus trees are targeted, which have nothing to do, if it's eucalyptus tree 100 feet over there, it poses no threat even if it catches on fire. So you were saying we used to have a habit of suppressing fire, that is currently going on ballistics right now. We're terrified of fire still, and then there's the logging industry and US Forest Service that also leverage that fear. So I guess I just would love to know my elected officials in this room, who I have access to say, no, we know a lot of that, Jack, hopefully we agree, but it's about defensible space and home hardening. you know, and xeriscape, that's fine, but that's nothing to do with cutting down our forests out of fear, which is just gonna make the place hotter and drier anyway. There's a question in there, I think, somewhere.
Yeah, no, I got your question. So, we haven't posted the recordings yet of the wildfire prevention meetings that we had, but one of my, so it was a panel, I facilitated a panel. And one of the panelists is a vegetation, biologist, tree specialist. Because what I hear you saying is there's different lenses that you can be looking at it, and it's just like, let's cut everything down and, you know, that's the way that we're gonna solve this. I actually think it's way more nuanced than that. I mean, hello, we live in Marin County, of course it's way nuanced than that, and there's biodiversity that's needed. Those conversations, I can assure you, are all taking place. And our vegetation management specialist, her name is Kate Anderson, she had her background in botany and everything else, so 100%. Yes, it is a balance, it's threading the needle, whatever, we have trade-off, and we're gonna continue to embrace that, and we're gonna continue to adapt. So I couldn't agree with you more, and it's not gonna be wholesale cutting, and it's going to be doing what we can with the with where we are, with what makes sense. We're not gonna be a Southwest, nothing but gravel and cactuses, that's not what we're growing here.
Thank you. I just concur. Thanks for I concur with Mayor Kate.
Brilliant. All right, we are at our end. I really thank you for the questions. You guys always have amazing questions. I want to thank Supervisor Colbert, sorry for mispronunciation before, Mayor Kate, and all of you for being here. This was really very enlightening and it was a great conversation. So thank all of you, thank you, and don't forget March 6th for ranching in West Marin, and stay safe in the weather. Thanks all for coming.
Thank you.